Cold October morning, 1887. The town square filled with jeers as she knelt on the wooden platform, sold like cattle to pay her dead husband's debt. When the bearded stranger stepped forward with his gold, everyone expected the worst. But what happened next shocked every soul in Bitter Creek. He didn't claim his purchase, he set her free, wrapped his coat around her shoulders, offered her honest work at his mountain cabin. What she found there changed everything. 2 Apache children. Children the town wanted gone. Children who held secrets that powerful men would kill for. She thought she was saving herself. She had no idea she was walking into a war. When mercy meets greed, who survives when the mountain burns? Your comments remind me that we're not alone in feeling deeply. If loyalty, second chances, and human dignity mean something to you, then you're right where you belong. The autumn wind whistled through Bitter Creek's town square, carrying the bite of early winter in its breath. Weathered wooden buildings loomed like silent witnesses around the auction block, where Martha Henley knelt, her world shrouded in rough burlap. Through the coarse fabric, she could make out the jeering voices that cut deeper than the October chill. Silas Wickham's nasal voice rang out across the square. "What am I bid for this fine specimen of domestic help? $47 will clear her dead husband's debt to First Bank of Bitter Creek." His boot heels clicked against the wooden platform as he circled Martha's kneeling form. "She's strong as an ox, folks. Look at the size of her. Could do the work of 2 regular maids." Cruel laughter rippled through the crowd. Martha's cheeks burned with shame beneath the sack, tears soaking into the rough fabric. Her bound hands trembled in her lap as coarse voices called out from the crowd. "Reckon she'd eat more than she's worth," a miner shouted, triggering another wave of laughter. "Might be worth something if you're looking to keep warm this winter," another voice suggested, followed by whistles and crude remarks that made Martha's stomach turn. The auctioneer's voice took on a wheedling tone. "Come now, gentlemen. Surely someone can offer something for such a substantial investment." More snickers followed his emphasis on substantial. "2 bits, someone called. "3, another voice added. 50 cents. A final bid rang out, followed by silence. Wickham's voice dripped with disdain. 50 cents? Is that all? Going once." Heavy boots thudded against packed earth, approaching the platform. A hush fell over the crowd as a shadow fell across Martha. She could sense a massive presence nearby, and her whole body began to shake. "Please don't hurt me," she whispered, her voice barely audible through the sack. The words triggered another round of heartless laughter from the crowd. A deep voice cut through the mockery like a knife through butter. $2. The laughter died as quickly as it had begun. Martha heard murmurs of Ezra Stone ripple through the crowd. The name meant nothing to her, but the respectful silence that followed spoke volumes. "Well now," Wickham's voice had lost some of its swagger. $2 from Mr. Stone. Going once?" Martha held her breath, hardly daring to hope that this mysterious bidder might be different from the others. "Going twice?" The crowd remained silent, though Martha could hear them shuffling their feet in the dirt. The gavel cracked like a gunshot. "Sold! To Ezra Stone for $2! Heavy footsteps approached Martha, and she tensed, expecting rough handling. Instead, gentle hands carefully untied the rope binding her wrists. The burlap sack was lifted away with surprising tenderness, and Martha found herself blinking in the harsh morning light. She raised her eyes to see a tall, broad-shouldered man with a graying beard and weathered face. His buckskin spoke of a life in the mountains, but his eyes, a startling clear blue, held nothing but compassion as they met hers. The crowd began to disperse, their entertainment concluded. Some still snickered and pointed, but none dared to make their comments loud enough for Ezra Stone to hear. The mountain man kept his body positioned between Martha and the dispersing crowd, as if shielding her from their cruel gazes. Martha remained frozen on her knees, unable to process this sudden turn of events. The morning's humiliation had left her feeling smaller than she'd ever felt in her considerable frame, yet something in the quiet dignity of the man before her gave her the courage to find her voice. Again. "Thank you, Mr. Stone," she whispered, her eyes dropping to the rough boards beneath her knees. The mountain man's gentle hands lifted the burlap sack from Martha's head, letting the harsh October sunlight flood her vision. She blinked away tears, her brown eyes wide with fear as she looked up at Ezra Stone. The crowd that had been so boisterous moments before fell into an uneasy silence, waiting to see what this mysterious mountain man would do with his purchase. But Ezra wasn't looking at the crowd. His weathered face creased with concern as he studied Martha's tear-streaked cheeks and trembling form. Without a word, he shrugged off his heavy buffalo coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. The warm weight of it engulfed her, carrying the scent of pine needles and wood smoke. "This woman ain't property," Ezra's deep voice carried across the town square, quiet but firm as mountain bedrock. "Nobody owns nobody in God's country." A murmur rippled through the onlookers as Ezra reached for the leather pouch at his belt. His large hands moved with surprising delicacy as he measured out piles of gold dust onto the auctioneer's scale. The yellow powder glinted in the morning light as he carefully counted out $47 worth. Banker Cornelius Hayes stepped forward, his thin face pinched with displeasure. "Now see here, Stone. Here's your money," Ezra cut him off, pushing the pile of gold dust across the platform. "The debt's paid in full." Hayes couldn't argue with that. He scooped up the gold dust with practiced movements, checking the weight one final time, before nodding grudgingly. Ezra took the auction papers from Wickham's slack fingers. With deliberate movements, he tore them into tiny pieces, letting them scatter in the cold wind like autumn leaves. Then he turned to Martha, still kneeling on the rough boards. "Ma'am," he said softly, extending one calloused hand. "Let me help you up." Martha stared at the offered hand, hardly daring to believe this wasn't some cruel joke, but Ezra's blue eyes held nothing but patience and kindness. She placed her trembling hand in his, and he helped her to her feet with surprising gentleness, steadying her when she swayed. Sheriff Morrison pushed through the crowd, his tin star catching the sunlight. "Now hold on just a minute." "The debt's paid legal and proper," Ezra said calmly. "Ain't nothing more to discuss." He turned to Martha, his voice softening. "Ma'am, I've got a cabin up in the mountains. Been needing someone to help with the cooking and keeping house." He paused, making sure she met his eyes. "It's honest work, with your own private quarters and full dignity. You'd be treated with respect." Martha's heart thundered in her chest. She looked around at the town square where she'd faced such humiliation, at the faces that had laughed at her pain. Then she looked back at this strange mountain man who had treated her with more kindness in 5 minutes than she'd known in 20 years of marriage. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but steady. "I accept your offer, Mr. Stone." Ezra nodded, as if he'd expected no other answer. He kept one supportive hand under her elbow as he guided her down the auction platform steps and across the dusty square to where his wagon waited. The crowd parted before them, their expressions a mixture of confusion and disbelief. The wagon was sturdy and well-maintained, with a fresh bed of clean straw in the back. Ezra helped Martha climb up onto the wooden seat, making sure she was settled before taking his place beside her. He clicked his tongue at the team of horses, and the wagon began to move. As they rolled out of town, the sun reached its midday height. Martha glanced back one final time at the bewildered faces growing smaller behind them. The buffalo coat was warm around her shoulders, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt something that might have been hope stirring in her chest. The wagon wheels creaked steadily as Ezra's team of horses picked their way up the winding mountain trail. Martha huddled deeper into the warmth of his buffalo coat, still struggling to believe the events of the morning were real, The cruel faces of the townsfolk seemed to fade with each clip-clop of hooves against the rocky path. "Reckon we've got about 3 hours of trail ahead of us," Ezra said softly, his deep voice gentle as summer rain. "You warm enough there, ma'am?" Martha nodded, stealing a glance at her rescuer. In the clear mountain light, she could see the silver threading through his dark beard and the kind wrinkles around his eyes. His massive hands held the reins with surprising delicacy. "I've been up on this mountain going on 5 years now," Ezra continued, gesturing at the rising peaks ahead. "Found some good gold deposits, enough to live on comfortable like. Mostly keep to myself, work the claim, tend my garden." He paused, checking Martha's reaction. "Cabin's got 2 bedrooms. One's yours, with a proper door that locks. You'll have your privacy and safety. I give you my word on that." Martha's hands twisted in her lap. "Why?" She swallowed hard, finding her voice. "Why would you help someone like me?" Ezra's blue eyes met hers steadily. "Because it ain't right, treating folks that way. Simple as that." Something in his straightforward answer helped Martha relax, just a fraction. As the wagon climbed higher, the October air grew crisp and clean, heavy with the scent of pine needles. Her words came easier now, spilling out like water from a broken dam. "I was married 20 years to Edgar Henley," she said quietly. He wasn't a kind man. Loved his whiskey more than anything else. 2 months ago, it finally killed him." She stared at her worn shoes. "Left nothing but debts behind." Ezra nodded, letting her words settle between them. "Can't say I'm sorry to hear he's gone, considering how he treated you." Martha blinked back tears. "Never known a man to speak gentle to me before today." "Well then," Ezra said firmly, "them that didn't treat you proper were wrong, plain and simple." As the afternoon wore on, Ezra pointed out landmarks along their journey. "That there's the east boundary of my land," he said, indicating a massive lightning-struck pine. "Got 160 acres total, mix of meadow and forest. Good hunting, fresh spring water year-round." The sun was sinking towards the western peaks when they finally reached a wide clearing. Martha caught her breath at the sight of the cabin. Solid logs chinked with clay, a sturdy stone chimney reaching skyward. A clear stream burbled past, and smoke curled invitingly from the chimney stack. "Left early this morning to head to town," Ezra explained as they approached, "but someone should have kept the fire going while I was gone." Martha's heart skipped a beat. "Someone?" Ezra guided the wagon to a stop beside the cabin, just as twilight began painting the mountains in shades of purple and gold. The smoke from the chimney promised warmth within, but Martha found herself wondering who else called this peaceful place home. She glanced at Ezra, but his weathered face gave nothing away as he set the brake and climbed down from the wagon. He came around to her side, offering his hand to help her down. Despite his massive size, his touch was gentle as a summer breeze. Martha stood beside the wagon, taking in the peaceful scene. The well-swept yard, the neat woodpile, the garden plot cleared for winter. Everything spoke of care and attention. But who had tended the fire while Ezra was in town? The question hung in the air like wood smoke as the mountain twilight deepened around them. Ezra's strong hands steadied Martha as she stepped down from the wagon, her legs stiff from the long journey. Before she could catch her balance, the cabin door burst open. 2 children exploded onto the porch in a flurry of movement and excited voices. "Yati, Uncle Ezra!" they called out in unison, their words tumbling over each other in rapid Apache. The children rushed down the steps, their moccasined feet barely touching the ground. Martha watched in amazement as they threw themselves at the mountain man, who gathered them close with a tenderness that transformed his weathered face. The girl, about 10 years old, switched to English as she pulled back to study Ezra's face. "Uncle Ezra, did the town people hurt you?" Her dark eyes, bright with intelligence, searched his features anxiously. Her long black hair hung in two neat braids, decorated with intricate beadwork that caught the fading light. The younger boy, perhaps 8 years old, hung back slightly. He regarded Martha with serious eyes that seemed too old for his young face. Both children had copper-toned skin and features that spoke of mixed heritage, the high cheekbones and dark complexion of their Apache mother softened by their white father's influence. "I'm just fine, little ones," Ezra assured them, resting one big hand on each child's shoulder. "I want you to meet Miss Martha. She's going to help us with cooking and keeping house." He turned to Martha with gentle pride in his voice. "These are my friend James Whitfield's children, Morning Star and Little Hawk. Their Apache mama, Running Deer, went to walk with the ancestors last spring when the smallpox came." Martha's heart clenched at the shadow of grief that crossed the children's faces. Without hesitation, she lowered herself carefully to one knee, bringing herself to their eye level despite her size. "I'm very pleased to meet you both," she said softly, the way she always spoke to her young students. Morning Star took a small step forward. "Did you come from the town? Do you know how to make biscuits like Mrs. Miller at the store?" "I do know how to make biscuits," Martha smiled, "and pies and cakes too. Would you like to learn?" Little Hawk remained watchful, but his rigid posture relaxed slightly at her gentle tone. "Our father went away after Mother died," he said quietly. "He didn't want us anymore." Martha's throat tightened with emotion. "Well then, he was a fool to leave such fine children behind." Ezra cleared his throat. "Let's get Miss Martha settled and see about some supper. You two kept the stew warm like I asked?" The children nodded eagerly, leading the way into the cabin. The main room was neat and warm, with a pot of venison stew simmering on the wood stove. As they settled around the sturdy table, Martha noticed how well cared for the children were. Their clothes clean and mended, their manner respectful but clearly secure in Ezra's affection. Over bowls of rich stew and fresh biscuits, Martha began to understand the deeper currents running beneath this peaceful scene. The children spoke of townspeople who called Ezra Indian lover and made threats about driving him off his land. Morning Star mentioned a letter from the territorial government about sending them to a boarding school back east to learn proper ways. "They want to cut our hair and make us forget Apache words," Little Hawk said, his young voice bitter. "Like they did to our cousin at the fort school." "That ain't happening," Ezra said firmly, but Martha caught the worry in his eyes. As she helped clear the dishes later, Martha's hands trembled slightly. She had thought only of her own safety when accepting Ezra's offer of shelter. Now she realized her choice carried far greater weight. These children needed more than just a housekeeper. They needed protection, understanding, and love. Looking at their earnest faces in the lamplight, Martha felt something shift in her heart, like a key turning in a long, rusted lock. The mountain air carried a crisp bite as Martha woke before dawn in her small bedroom. She lay still for a moment, savoring the quiet and privacy, something she hadn't known in 20 years of marriage. The narrow bed was comfortable, with a handmade quilt that smelled of pine and fresh air. Through her window, the sky was just beginning to lighten, painting the mountain peaks in soft grays and purples. Movement caught her eye in the yard below. Ezra stood beside Little Hawk at the chopping block, his large hands gently guiding the boy's smaller ones as they positioned a piece of kindling. The axe came down with precision, splitting the wood cleanly. Little Hawk's face beamed with pride as Ezra squeezed his shoulder in approval. Near the chicken coop, Morning Star scattered feed to the strutting hens, her long braids swinging as she moved. The girl's voice carried softly on the morning air as she sang what sounded like an Apache song to the chickens. Martha dressed quickly in her cleanest dress, eager to prepare breakfast for this unexpected family. In the kitchen, she found the children had already brought in fresh eggs and milk. They watched shyly as she mixed biscuit dough with practiced hands. "Would you like to learn how to make them extra fluffy?" Martha asked, smiling at Morning Star's eager nod. Soon both children were helping, their initial reserve melting as Martha showed them how to handle the dough gently. After breakfast, Morningstar took Martha's hand. "Come see our garden," she exclaimed, pulling her toward a neat patch of earth behind the cabin. Raised beds held the remains of summer vegetables, squash, beans, and root crops waiting to be harvested before the first frost. "We grow things like Mother taught us," Morningstar explained, her voice softening at the mention of running deer. "She knew all the growing songs." Little Hawk appeared with his fishing line. "Want to see where I catch the biggest trout?" he asked, his serious face brightening as Martha nodded. He led her to a quiet pool in the stream, demonstrating with pride how he could land a fish almost as long as his arm. Throughout the day, Martha's heart swelled as the children gradually opened up to her. By supper time, she had prepared a feast of roasted venison, fresh bread, and apple pie that brought tears to Ezra's eyes. "Ain't had cooking like this since," he paused, swallowing hard. "Well, in a mighty long time." As darkness fell outside, Ezra gathered them around the fireplace. He pulled out a worn Bible, its leather cover smooth from years of handling. The children settled naturally into what was clearly their nightly ritual, Little Hawk leaning against Ezra's knee while Morningstar curled up on the rug. Ezra's deep voice filled the cabin as he read about David and Goliath. Martha noticed how the children listened intently, occasionally asking questions that showed they were familiar with many Bible stories. Throughout the evening, Morningstar and Little Hawk moved easily between Apache and English, their voices changing subtly with each language. Morningstar took special delight in teaching Martha Apache words for common items. "This is behagashi," she said, pointing to the cow butter on the table, "and the bread is ba." Martha repeated the words carefully, making the children giggle at her pronunciation. Yet their laughter held no mockery, only the pure joy of sharing something they loved. As the evening drew to a close, Martha helped the children prepare for bed, a task that Running Deer had once performed. She straightened Little Hawk's blanket and smoothed Morningstar's hair, her touch gentle and maternal. Just as she was about to leave their room, Morningstar's small voice stopped her. "Will you be our new mother?" The question hung in the air like morning mist. Martha's heart raced with equal measures of joy and fear. She had never been a mother, had never dared to hope for such a blessing. Now, looking into Morningstar's hopeful eyes, she felt a love so deep it almost hurt. The answer caught in her throat as tears welled in her eyes. For the first time in her life, Martha understood what it meant to truly belong somewhere, to have a purpose beyond mere survival. In this remote mountain cabin, with these precious children and their gentle guardian, she had found something she never knew she was missing: a family. The crisp mountain days settled into a peaceful rhythm as October gave way to November. Martha's presence transformed the cabin from a simple shelter into a true home. The windows gleamed, curtains she'd sewn from flour sacks fluttered in the breeze, and delicious aromas constantly wafted from the kitchen. Morningstar sat at the rough-hewn table each afternoon, carefully forming letters in her primer while Martha kneaded bread nearby. "See how I wrote mountain without help?" the girl would exclaim, her face glowing with pride. Later, she'd teach Martha Apache lullabies as they worked in the garden, patiently correcting her pronunciation with gentle giggles. Little Hawk, still serious but warming to Martha's kindness, presented her with a wooden spoon he'd carved himself. "For your cooking," he said shyly, ducking his head as she wrapped him in a tearful hug. The spoon's handle bore careful etchings of pine trees and stars. In the evenings, after the children were tucked in, Martha and Ezra would sit by the fire, their conversations growing deeper as trust built between them. One night, as the flames cast dancing shadows on the walls, Ezra spoke of his past. "Her name was Sarah," he said softly, staring into the fire. "Lost her and the baby both 5 years ago. Thought my heart would never heal." He glanced at Martha, his eyes holding something that made her breath catch. Never expected to find, well, never expected this. Martha found herself sharing things she'd never told anyone, about Edgar's cruelty, about dreams she'd buried so deep she'd almost forgotten them. Ezra listened without judgment, his quiet strength a balm to old wounds. But their mountain peace couldn't last forever. Sheriff Morrison's horse appeared one afternoon, kicking up dust as he rode into the yard. The children scattered inside at the sight of his badge, while Ezra met him at the gate. "Clayton Ashford's in town," Morrison announced, shifting uncomfortably in his saddle. "Railroad surveyor, got Eastern money behind him, says this mountain's perfect for their depot plans." He handed Ezra an official-looking envelope. "He's offering $3,000 for your claim." Ezra didn't even open it. "This land ain't for sale at any price." The sheriff's face grew grave. Ashford ain't used to hearing no. He's been talking in town, spreading stories about you harboring hostile Indians, corrupting a decent white woman. He glanced toward the cabin where Martha stood in the doorway. "Folks are listening, Ezra, especially them that never approved of you taking in Whitfield's half-breeds." Martha felt her face flush with anger at the slur, but Ezra remained calm. Let them talk. Truth stands on its own feet. A week later, a wagon full of town ladies rattled up the mountain trail, led by Mrs. Hayes, the banker's wife, in her finest visiting dress. Martha welcomed them with fresh coffee and apple pie, though their pinched expressions made it clear this wasn't a social call. "Mrs. Henley," Mrs. Hayes began, using Martha's widow name pointedly, "we've come to save you from ruin. Living alone with a man, caring for Indian children, it isn't proper. People are talking." "Mr. Stone is a Christian gentleman," Martha replied firmly. "These children need care and love." "Love won't matter when the authorities come," another woman interjected. "That railroad man says Stone's breaking territorial laws, keeping Indian children from proper schooling." "Come back to town with us. We'll find you respectable work." Martha looked out the window, where Morning Star was hanging laundry, singing one of her mother's songs. Little Hawk sat nearby, whittling a new project. Beyond them, Ezra split wood, his powerful strokes steady and sure. The first November snow dusted the distant peaks, glinting like silver in the afternoon sun. The choice before her was clear. Return to town and safety, or stay with this unlikely family who had shown her more love in 3 weeks than she'd known in 20 years of marriage. She turned back to the waiting women, her voice steady despite her pounding heart. Martha sat alone by the stream, her tears freezing on her cheeks in the crisp November morning air. The townswomen's visit had left her heart in turmoil. The water bubbled over smooth stones, its constant flow matching her troubled thoughts. Heavy footsteps crunched on fallen leaves behind her. Ezra lowered his massive frame beside her on the fallen log, his presence warm and steady in the mountain chill. "Them town ladies upset you something fierce," he said softly, his deep voice gentle as a summer breeze. Martha wiped her eyes with her apron. "They mean well, I reckon. Say I'm risking my reputation staying here." "Martha." Ezra turned toward her, his weathered face serious in the morning light. "Been meaning to speak my piece for a while now. Might as well do it proper." She held her breath, afraid to hope. "When I first saw you on that auction block, my heart near broke. Not because of your size." He reached for her hand, engulfing it in his calloused palm. "But because I saw someone beautiful being treated cruel. These weeks watching you with the children, seeing your kindness, your strength, despite what life's handed you." He paused, searching for words. "Martha, I love you. Not despite your size, but because of who you are, your beautiful soul that shines through everything you do." Fresh tears spilled down Martha's cheeks, but these were different from before. "Oh, Ezra, I love you too, but I'm scared. What if I bring more trouble? The railroad man, the townspeople, they'll never accept us." "Look there." Ezra pointed to where 2 sparrows shared a branch, one large, one small, perfectly balanced together. God brought us together for a purpose, to make a family built on love, not what others think is proper. The children need a mother's love. I need a wife's heart. And you, Martha, you need people who see your true worth. That evening, after their usual Bible reading, Ezra stood before the fireplace. Little Hawk and Morning Star sat straighter, trying to hide their knowing smiles. "Martha Henley," Ezra said, his voice thick with emotion, "would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Help me raise these children in love and faith?" "Yes," Martha whispered through joyful tears. "Yes, with all my heart." Little Hawk darted outside and returned with a crown of late wildflowers he and Morning Star had gathered. He placed it carefully on Martha's head, his serious face breaking into a rare, full smile. Morning Star stepped forward next, holding something in her small hands. "This was our mother running deers," she said, presenting a beautiful beaded bracelet. "Grandfather White Bear came last week in secret. He said you have a good heart, like our mother. He gives his blessing." Martha's fingers trembled as she touched the delicate beadwork. "Your grandfather visited, and he approves?" Morning Star nodded. "He says love makes its own family." Martha pulled both children close, her heart so full it might burst. Ezra's strong arms encircled all 3 of them. "We'll have us a proper wedding," he said, "one that honors both ways, Christian and Apache. Pastor Johnson's a fair man, he'll understand." Martha bustled to prepare a celebration feast, her mind already planning special dishes. The children helped, Little Hawk bringing in fresh trout he'd caught that morning, Morning Star gathering the last root vegetables from the garden. As they sat down to eat, snow began falling outside the windows, thick white flakes dancing in the gathering dusk. Inside, the cabin glowed with warmth and joy. Martha looked around at their faces. Ezra's gentle strength, Little Hawk's quiet wisdom, Morning Star's bright spirit, and knew she'd found her true home at last. They were unaware that down in Bitter Creek, Clayton Ashford was gathering men in the saloon, his smooth voice spinning lies about murder and stolen claims. But in that moment, their happiness was complete and untouched by the gathering storm. December swept across the mountain with a blanket of pristine snow, transforming Ezra's homestead into a winter wonderland. The deep drifts made travel nearly impossible, creating a peaceful isolation that wrapped the family in its quiet embrace. On a bright Saturday morning, Reverend Samuel Matthews guided his horse through the snow-laden trail, his black coat dusted white. The elderly preacher's kind face broke into a warm smile as he approached the decorated cabin. Pine boughs and dried flowers adorned every window, their sweet scent mixing with wood smoke in the crisp air. Inside the cabin's cozy warmth, Morning Star helped Martha prepare in the bedroom. The girl's skilled fingers wove Martha's brown hair into intricate braids, carefully placing the copper and bone ornaments that had once belonged to running deer. "These are sacred to our people," Morning Star explained, her voice soft with reverence. "Grandfather says they bring blessings to the marriage." Martha touched the ornaments gently. "I'm honored to wear them, dear one." In the main room, Little Hawk helped Ezra with his best white shirt, carefully smoothing the wrinkles. From a wooden box, the boy retrieved a beautifully beaded vest, a gift from their grandfather, White Bear. "It tells the story of a great chief," Little Hawk explained seriously, helping Ezra put it on. "Grandfather says you have the same kind heart." As sunset painted the snow-covered peaks in shades of rose and gold, the family gathered before the stone fireplace. Martha wore the blue calico dress she'd sewn herself, its careful stitching a testament to hours of loving work. When Ezra saw her, his eyes filled with tears. "You're beautiful," he whispered. Reverend Matthews opened his worn Bible, its pages illuminated by lamplight. "We gather here to join 2 hearts that God has clearly brought together," he began, his voice strong despite his years. Love knows no boundaries of size or circumstance. It sees only the truth of the soul. The ceremony blended their two worlds with grace. They exchanged simple gold rings and Christian vows, then shared bread and clear stream water from a ceremonial clay cup, an Apache tradition symbolizing shared life. Little Hawk and Morning Star stood close, their young voices rising in an Apache blessing song that filled the cabin with haunting beauty. The ancient words spoke of unity, strength, and the eternal circle of family love. Martha's hands trembled as she spoke her vows, but her voice was clear and strong. I promise to love you and these children with all my heart, to create a home filled with joy and understanding, to stand beside you through whatever trials may come. Ezra's deep voice caught with emotion as he responded. I promise to cherish you always, to protect our family with my life, to see your beautiful soul in every sunrise, and to thank God each day for bringing you to us. After Reverend Matthews pronounced them husband and wife, they celebrated with a feast that showcased Martha's cooking skills. The table groaned under platters of roasted venison, golden cornbread, and jars of wild berry preserves. The children had decorated with pine cones and red winter berries, making the cabin festive and bright. The next morning, as Reverend Matthews prepared for his journey back to town, he drew Ezra and Martha aside. His kind face was troubled. I must warn you, he said quietly. Clayton Ashford has been spreading dangerous lies. He's convinced many that Ezra murdered a prospector for his claim. Be on your guard. Despite this shadow, the family enjoyed 7 days of pure happiness. They built snowmen in the yard, had playful snowball fights, and gathered around the fire each evening to share stories. Martha taught the children to make paper snowflakes, while Ezra played his harmonica. Their laughter echoed through the snowy woods, a perfect symphony of joy. For that one precious week, love seemed stronger than any threat. The mountain kept them safe in its white embrace, their happiness as pure as the falling snow. A week after the wedding, frost etched delicate patterns on the cabin windows as Martha stirred beneath warm quilts. The crunch of horse hooves in crusty snow jolted her awake. Through the frosted glass, dark shapes emerged from the swirling white, 9 riders approaching the cabin. Her heart hammered as she recognized Sheriff Morrison's distinctive brown coat. Behind him rode Clayton Ashford, his Eastern-cut suit incongruous against the wild mountain backdrop. 6 rough-looking miners completed the group, their faces hard beneath snow-dusted hats. Ezra, Martha called softly, but he was already pulling on his boots, his expression grim. The children appeared in their doorway, eyes wide with fear. Morning Star clutched Little Hawk's hand as heavy boots stomped onto the porch. Sheriff Morrison's knock echoed through the cabin. When Ezra opened the door, cold air rushed in with the unwelcome visitors. Ezra Stone, Morrison said, his voice carrying forced authority. We're here about Billy Hawkins. He was found dead near your claim yesterday morning. Martha's breath caught. That's impossible. Ezra's been here with us all week since our wedding. Clayton Ashford stepped forward, brushing snow from his expensive coat. 2 witnesses saw him arguing with Hawkins the day before the murder. His thin smile didn't reach his eyes. That's a lie, Ezra said quietly. I haven't seen Hawkins in months. Morrison produced a warrant, the paper crackling in the cold air. Judge Pemberton signed this morning. We're taking you in for questioning. Martha noticed Ashford's slight smirk at the judge's name. Everyone knew Pemberton was deep in debt to the railroad company. Pa, don't let them take you! Little Hawk broke free from his sister's grip, running to Ezra. Ezra knelt, gathering both children close. Be brave, little ones. Mind Martha and remember what I taught you. His eyes met Martha's, conveying unspoken urgency. If anything happens, take them to Reverend Matthews. He'll know what to do. The miners moved forward, rough hands grabbing Ezra's arms. Martha stepped between them, her sighs making them pause. You have no right. He's innocent. Ashford's cold laugh cut through the tension. "Mrs. Stone, consider your position carefully. As his wife, you could be charged as an accomplice." He moved closer, lowering his voice. "Unless, of course, you're willing to testify about your husband's violent nature. How he forced you to marry him, perhaps." Martha drew herself up to her full height, anger overcoming fear. "My husband is a good man. I won't help you destroy him with lies." "Such loyalty," Ashford sneered. "Remember, those half-breed children have no legal guardian if you're both in jail. The government boarding school back east would be happy to take them." Morningstar's sob cut through Martha's heart like a knife. The girl understood all too well what Ashford's threat meant: separation, loss of culture, punishment for speaking Apache. They forced Ezra outside into the bitter cold. Martha and the children followed to the porch, watching helplessly as the miners shackled his wrists. Ezra held his head high, showing no fear as they lifted him onto a spare horse. Snow swirled around the mounted men as they turned their horses toward town. Martha clutched the children close, their tears freezing on their cheeks as Ezra disappeared into the white wilderness. His last look back carried all his love and worry for his family. That night, huddled together in front of the fire, Martha pulled Ezra's worn Bible into her lap. The children pressed against her sides, seeking comfort in her warmth. "Let me read you about David," she said, her voice steady despite her fear. "A young boy who faced a giant named Goliath when everyone else was afraid." As she read the ancient words about courage and faith, Martha silently promised both her children and herself that they would find a way to save Ezra. Like David, they would face this giant with truth as their weapon. "We won't let them win," Morningstar whispered in Apache, then repeated in English for Martha's benefit. "No," Martha agreed, holding them closer. "We won't." Martha woke before dawn, her determination as cold and sharp as the winter air. She dressed quickly, then roused the children. Within an hour, they had harnessed Ezra's sturdy horse to the wooden sled, piling blankets around them for the treacherous descent into town. The mountain trail wound through snow-laden pines, their sled runners cutting fresh tracks in the pristine white. Morningstar and Little Hawk huddled close to Martha, their breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. The town emerged from the morning mist like a collection of weathered wooden boxes, smoke rising from chimneys into the pale sky. Sheriff Morrison stood at his desk when they entered the jail, surprise flickering across his weathered face. "Mrs. Stone, I don't reckon this is a good idea." "We have the right to see him," Martha said firmly, drawing herself up to her full height. The sheriff's shoulders sagged. 5 minutes. That's all I can give you." They found Ezra in the last cell, chains binding his wrists to the wall. Despite his bonds, he managed to embrace them all, his beard rough against Martha's tear-wet cheek. "Listen carefully," he whispered in her ear, his voice barely audible. "In the root cellar behind the potato barrel, legal papers from Morningstar and Little Hawk's grandfather. He deeded them mineral rights to the whole mountain. The children own—" Shouts erupted from the street, cutting off his words. "Sheriff, get that murderer out here!" Ashford's voice carried through the walls. Morrison burst in, keys jangling. "Ashford says Stone's trying to escape. Got to move him." "That's a lie!" Martha protested, but rough hands were already pulling Ezra away from his family. They forced him into the snowy street, where a crowd had gathered. Morningstar clung to Martha's skirts, while Little Hawk pressed against her side. Ashford stood in the center of the street, his expensive coat gleaming with moisture. "He's got a gun!" someone shouted from the crowd. 3 shots cracked the winter air. Ezra jerked backward, red blooming across his shirt. He crumpled into the snow as Martha's scream shattered the morning silence. She rushed forward, gathering his still form in her arms, her tears falling onto his face. Dr. Hamilton pushed through the crowd, kneeling beside them. His fingers pressed against Ezra's neck, his expression grave. "Shot through the chest. He's gone, Mrs. Stone. I'm sorry." The children's sobs tore at Martha's heart as she cradled her husband's body. Ashford's boots crunched in the blood-stained snow as he approached. 24 hours to clear out of my property," he said coldly. "After that, you'll be arrested for trespassing." Reverend Matthews stepped forward. "She'll stay with us tonight. The man deserves a proper burial." Hours later, Martha sat in the Reverend's parlor, staring at Ezra's still form laid out on their best table. Mrs. Matthews had taken the exhausted children upstairs, but Martha couldn't leave her vigil. She pressed her hand against Ezra's cold one, remembering their wedding vows just a week ago. The first light of dawn was creeping through the windows when Mrs. Matthews burst in, her face flushed with excitement. "Martha!" she whispered urgently. "Come quickly!" Martha followed her to the table where Mrs. Matthews pressed her fingers to Ezra's neck. "There! Do you feel it? The faintest pulse?" Martha's hand shook as she touched the spot. There, beneath her fingers, was the weakest flutter of life. "We must keep this secret," Mrs. Matthews said, her voice barely audible. "If Ashford learns he's alive, he'll finish what he started." Martha nodded, hope blazing in her chest like a flame. "What do we do?" "We tell everyone we're preparing him for burial, then we move him to the church basement tonight. I'll fetch Dr. Hamilton. He's a good man, he'll help us." Martha bent over her husband's face, her tears falling on his cold cheeks. This time, they were tears of desperate hope. For 3 days, Martha played the role of grieving widow, while hope burned secretly in her heart. She wore black, accepted condolences from townspeople, and made visible preparations to leave with the children. But each night she slipped into the church basement, where Mrs. Matthews tended to Ezra's wounds. The makeshift sick room smelled of carbolic acid and herbal poultices. Dr. Hamilton had extracted the bullet, which had missed Ezra's heart by less than 2 inches. "It's a miracle," he'd whispered, cleaning the wound. "Any closer, and we wouldn't be having this conversation." Ezra lay pale and still on a narrow cot, his breathing shallow but steady. Sometimes he stirred, mumbling fragments of prayer or calling for Martha and the children, but consciousness eluded him. Martha spent every possible moment at his side, holding his hand and whispering words of love and encouragement. During the day, she forced herself to focus on gathering evidence. The trip to their mountain cabin proved fruitful. In the root cellar, behind the potato barrel, just as Ezra had said, she found a leather document case. Her hands trembled as she opened it by lamplight. The first paper made her gasp. A formal deed granting mineral rights to the entire mountain, signed by Swift Eagle, the children's Apache grandfather, and witnessed by 3 territorial officials. Next came adoption papers, legally binding and properly filed, making Ezra the children's father in the eyes of both territorial and federal law. But the most startling discovery was a crumpled letter from Billy Hawkins himself, dated just days before his death. He wrote about dangerous conditions in his mine shaft and his fears of a cave-in. The letter proved he'd died in exactly such an accident, not by Ezra's hand. Martha shared these findings with Reverend Matthews, who immediately wrote to his brother, Territorial Judge William Matthews. The judge's reply came by express rider. He would investigate Ashford's activities personally. Through careful questioning of sympathetic townspeople, Martha began piecing together Ashford's corrupt dealings. The banker's wife, Mrs. Hayes, revealed that her husband had been forced to approve fraudulent loans. The county clerk admitted to witnessing forged land documents under threat of violence. "Ashford's been squeezing folks for months," Tom Miller, the livery stable owner, told Martha quietly. "Buying land for pennies, threatening those who won't sell. Ain't right what he did to your Ezra." Support grew quietly but steadily. Sarah Jenkins from the general store slipped extra supplies into Martha's purchases. The blacksmith's wife brought food for the children. Even Sheriff Morrison began looking troubled when Ashford's name was mentioned. On the third night, Martha sat beside Ezra's cot, reading from his Bible by candlelight. A change in his breathing made her look up. His eyes were open, clear and focused for the first time since the shooting. "Martha?" His voice was weak but steady. "My love." Tears spilled down her cheeks as she pressed his hand. "I'm here, dearest. The children are safe. We're all safe." "How long?" he whispered. 3 days. Everyone thinks you're dead. We had to protect you from Ashford." Understanding flickered in his eyes. Martha quickly told him about the documents, the evidence of Hawkins's real death, and Judge Matthews' impending investigation. Despite his weakness, Ezra's jaw set with determination. "We must fight," he said, his voice growing stronger. "Not just for us, for everyone Ashford's wronged, for justice itself." Martha kissed his forehead gently. "We will. Together. The whole town's starting to turn against him. They just needed someone to take the first stand." "My brave wife," Ezra murmured, managing a small smile. "God brought us together for this very purpose." Dr. Hamilton arrived to check Ezra's wounds, nodding with satisfaction at his patient's improved condition. "Keep him quiet," he instructed Martha. "He's healing well, but he'll need time to regain his strength." Martha settled back in her chair, still holding Ezra's hand as he drifted into natural sleep. For the first time since the shooting, real hope filled her heart. They had the truth on their side, and truth, like love, was stronger than bullets or lies. January's bitter winds swept through Bitter Creek as Martha Henley Stone stepped out of mourning black and into her role as defender of justice. The new year brought fresh purpose to her steps as she walked the icy streets, gathering allies in the fight against Clayton Ashford's corruption. Judge William Matthews arrived on the morning stage, his silver hair and stern demeanor commanding immediate respect. He took residence in Reverend Matthews' study, methodically reviewing land deeds, bank records, and witness statements. His frown deepened with each document he examined. "These irregularities are shocking," the judge declared, holding up a stack of property transfers. "Forged signatures, backdated documents, missing witness attestations. Ashford's been remarkably sloppy in his greed." Dr. Hamilton proved an unexpected ally. The physician had examined Ezra's supposed corpse and kept detailed notes. "The angle of the bullet wound makes it impossible to be self-inflicted," he testified to Judge Matthews. "Someone shot him from at least 20 feet away and aimed to kill." One by one, townspeople found their courage. Tom Miller, the livery stable owner, described how Ashford threatened to burn his stable unless he signed over his water rights. Sarah Jenkins from the general store produced receipts showing Ashford's men never paid for supplies, instead demanding protection fees. Martha worked tirelessly, organizing testimonies and evidence while caring for Little Hawk and Morning Star. Each night, she slipped into the church basement to tend to Ezra, whose strength returned slowly but steadily. The children proved invaluable to building their case. "I saw Mr. Hawkins that morning," Little Hawk told Judge Matthews, his young face serious. "He was climbing down into his mine shaft. Later we heard the rumbling of the cave-in. Uncle Ezra tried to help dig him out, but it was too late." Morning Star's testimony about her grandfather's mineral rights deed carried special weight. "Grandfather Swift Eagle signed the papers in front of 3 witnesses," she explained. "He wanted us to have a legal claim to our ancestral lands." As January progressed, Ezra revealed more of Ashford's schemes. From his sickbed, he detailed how the railroad agent had systematically cheated Apache families of their land rights and jumped legitimate mining claims, using threats and violence to silence protests. "He's been building an empire on stolen land and broken lives," Ezra told Martha during one of their evening visits. "It's not just about our family anymore." Martha nodded, understanding growing in her heart. "Every person he's wronged deserves justice. We're fighting for all of them now." The evening before the hearing, Martha brought soup to Ezra's hidden room. Though still pale, he sat up straighter than he had in weeks. "I'm attending court tomorrow," he announced firmly. "But you're not strong enough," Martha protested, her heart clenching with fear. "Ashford still thinks you're dead. If he sees you—" "Truth must face lies in the light of day," Ezra interrupted gently. "We can't hide forever, my love. God didn't bring us together to cower in shadows." Martha took his hand, feeling the returning strength in his grip. "You're right, of course, but I've only just found you. I can't bear to lose you again." "You won't," Ezra promised. "We have something Ashford can never understand: love, faith, and the power of truth. Those are stronger than any bullet." Dr. Hamilton arrived to make a final examination. "Your fever's gone, and the wound is healing clean," he reported. "But you'll need help walking, and you must tell me at once if you feel faint." Martha watched her husband's face, seeing determination replace pain in his eyes. Tomorrow would bring their greatest test, but tonight she thanked God for the miracle of his survival and the chance to fight for justice together. The territorial courthouse buzzed with tension on that frosty January morning. Every wooden bench creaked under the weight of townspeople who packed the room, their breath visible in the chilly air. Judge William Matthews sat stern-faced at his elevated desk, his silver hair catching the weak winter sunlight that filtered through the courthouse's high windows. Clayton Ashford swaggered in wearing an expensive Eastern suit, a smirk playing at his lips as he took his seat beside his attorney. His confidence faltered visibly when the courthouse doors opened and Ezra Stone entered, leaning heavily on a cane but very much alive. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Ashford's face drained of color as if he'd seen a ghost. Martha helped Ezra to his seat, her chin held high. She wore her best blue calico dress, her hair neatly arranged, carrying herself with quiet dignity. Little Hawk and Morning Star sat beside their father, backs straight, faces solemn. "This hearing will come to order," Judge Matthews announced, his gavel crack echoing through the hushed room. "Mrs. Martha Stone, please take the stand." Martha rose steadily, despite her size, and made her way to the witness box. Gone was the trembling woman from the auction block. In her place stood a wife and mother determined to protect her family. "Tell us about the events of December 12th, Judge Matthews directed. Martha's voice rang clear and strong as she detailed Ashford's corruption, producing document after document showing forged signatures and illegal land seizures. She described the false arrest, the shooting, and the discovery of the legal papers in the root cellar. "These deeds prove the mineral rights belong to Swift Eagle's family," Martha explained, holding up the weathered papers. "And these adoption documents legally establish Ezra Stone as father to Little Hawk and Morning Star." When Ashford's attorney tried to discredit her testimony by mocking her appearance, Judge Matthews's face darkened. "You will treat Mrs. Stone with the respect due any witness in this court," he thundered. "Her size has no bearing on the truth of her words." Little Hawk testified next, his young voice steady as he described finding prospector Billy Hawkins after the mine collapse. Morningstar spoke about her grandfather's land deed, explaining the Apache customs of land stewardship that Ashford had repeatedly violated. Dr. Hamilton approached the bench with his medical records. "The bullet wound could only have come from someone shooting from a distance," he testified. "Mr. Stone was shot in cold blood." Reverend Matthews spoke of the family's character and faith, while a parade of townspeople detailed Ashford's threats and bribes. Tom Miller described the burned livery stable, Sarah Jenkins produced her protection payment records, and 3 other miners testified about jumped claims. When Martha took the stand for her final testimony, the courthouse fell silent. She looked at her family, Ezra's proud smile, the children's trusting faces, and found her courage. "This case isn't just about land or money," she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. "It's about the dignity God gives to every soul, whether they're Apache or white, rich or poor, big or small. Mr. Ashford thought he could build his fortune on broken lives and stolen dreams. He thought some people were worth less than others, that some families deserved to be torn apart for profit. Tears glistened in many eyes as she continued. But here in this territory, justice must be blind to color and circumstance. Every child deserves a loving home. Every person deserves to live without fear. Every family deserves protection under the law. Judge Matthews removed his spectacles, wiping them slowly as Martha finished speaking. He surveyed the packed courthouse before delivering his ruling. "I find all charges against Ezra Stone dismissed," he declared. "Furthermore, I order the immediate arrest of Clayton Ashford and his conspirators on charges of fraud, corruption, and attempted murder. The Stone family's land rights are hereby confirmed in perpetuity." The gavel fell with finality. As Martha helped Ezra rise, townspeople who had once jeered at her size now nodded respectfully. Sarah Jenkins pressed her hand warmly. Tom Miller tipped his hat. Even Mrs. Hayes, the banker's wife, offered a quiet apology for her earlier judgment. Outside the courthouse, winter sunshine broke through the clouds, gleaming on the fresh snow. Martha stood surrounded by her family, finally secure in their right to live and love as God intended. The mountain air sparkled with morning light as Martha Stone stood on the cabin's front porch, watching the June sunrise paint golden streaks across the meadow. 6 months had passed since that momentous day in the courthouse, and her heart swelled with gratitude at how far they'd come. Inside the cabin, the sounds of breakfast preparation mingled with children's laughter. Morning Star was setting the table, while Little Hawk helped Ezra bring in fresh eggs from the henhouse. Martha's kitchen, once bare and bachelor simple, now hummed with domestic warmth and the aroma of fresh-baked bread. "Mama Martha!" Morning Star called. "The other children are coming up the trail." Through the morning mist, Martha watched as 4 young riders approached on sturdy ponies. 2 were the Jenkins children, 1 was young Tommy Miller, and the 4th was Swift Eagle's grandson, who lived with his family in the next valley. They came 3 times a week for lessons in the makeshift schoolroom Martha had created in their cabin's new addition. Ezra had insisted on building it himself once he'd fully recovered from his wounds. "A proper school needs proper space," he'd said, his strong hands working the saw and plane until the room took shape, complete with a slate board and neat wooden desks he'd crafted himself. Martha welcomed her students inside, watching with quiet joy as they settled into their lessons. Morning Star and Little Hawk joined them, proud to help the younger ones with their letters and numbers. In this room, there was no distinction between white, Apache, or mixed heritage, just eager young minds drinking in knowledge. The seasons turned gently on their mountain, each month bringing new blessings. Their gold claim, combined with the children's mineral rights, provided more than enough for comfortable living. More importantly, their home had become a beacon of hope for others seeking justice and understanding in the territory. As autumn painted the aspens gold, Martha found herself increasingly called upon to speak for those who couldn't speak for themselves. She helped 3 mixed heritage families secure their land rights and advised countless others on legal matters. The same town that had once mocked her size now sought her counsel and respected her wisdom. When December arrived with its blanket of snow, Martha marveled at how different this Christmas would be from last year's desperate times. The cabin glowed with warmth and festivity. Pine boughs decorated the walls, their fresh scent mingling with spices from her holiday baking. Morning Star had woven beautiful Apache decorations, while Little Hawk's carved wooden figures adorned their modest tree. On Christmas morning, soft snow fell outside, while inside, the cabin radiated with joy. Martha sat in her favorite chair by the fire, the family Bible open in her lap. Ezra lounged on the floor, teaching the children a game with painted stones, a blend of Apache tradition and frontier pastime. "Mama," Little Hawk asked, his dark eyes serious, "will you read us the Christmas story again?" Martha's heart melted at the word "Mama," still precious every time she heard it. She began reading in her clear, strong voice, the same voice that had once trembled in fear but now rang with confidence and love. As she read, Martha caught glimpses of their Christmas feast preparations, the venison roasting, cornbread baking, and wild berry preserves Morning Star had helped her put up last summer. The cabin smelled of pine, cinnamon, and home. When evening settled over the mountain, the family gathered around their Christmas table. The lamplight cast a warm glow on their faces as they joined hands for grace. Martha looked at each beloved face, Ezra, strong and gentle, Morning Star, wise beyond her years, little Hawk, finally secure in his place in the world. "Dear Lord," Martha prayed, her voice rich with emotion, "thank you for second chances. Thank you for showing us that love knows no boundaries of size or race or circumstance. Thank you for turning our darkest hours into stepping stones toward this beautiful life." Outside, snow continued falling softly on their mountain sanctuary. Inside, the cabin glowed with lamplight and love, a testament to the transformative power of seeing worth in every human soul. Martha's thoughts drifted briefly to that terrible October morning on the auction block, marveling at how God had used even that moment of deepest humiliation to lead her to this perfect peace. As they shared their Christmas feast, laughter and love filled every corner of their home. Martha Stone, once a trembling widow facing public shame, now sat tall and proud, surrounded by the family she'd been blessed with and the life she'd helped build. Her size, once a source of mockery, had become as irrelevant as she'd always known it should be. What mattered was the size of her heart, which had grown large enough to embrace a whole new world of love and purpose. Thanks for tuning in. These stories remind us that life is more than headlines. It's about heartlines. Subscribe if you want more moments that make you pause, feel, and reflect.